Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Community Liaison Committee. It's Monday, the 4th of October, 2021. I am Sally Hanks, and I will be chairing this meeting this evening. Can I just do a few housekeeping rules? May I remind everyone present that this meeting is being recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise and feedback? If a participant wishes to speak, can they please put their hand up or use the raise hand function so you can be seen? And could you please ensure that all the debate is raised verbally through the chair and not via the chat function? For the sake of the recording, the chat function may be used to highlight any technical difficulties and to grab the attention of the chairman or the Democratic Services Officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they're addressing the committee, then they should let the chairman or the Democratic Officer know. If they have a webcam, they should try turning this off, as this will help with the broadband or the Wi-Fi, and they could possibly be heard better. So thank you for that. If we go then to the agenda, can I have apologies for absence, please? Do you have any, Amy?
I do, thank you, Chairman. I have apologies from Councillor Birch, Councillor Perks and Councillor Wilson from the Vale of Glamorgan, and from the Town and Community Councils. I have apologies received from Councillor Weddell from Cowbridge with Llanblethian, Councillor Thomas from Lantwick Major Town Council, Dr Howells from Pentleen Community Council, and Councillor Hawkins from Wick Community Council.
Thank you, Amy. And I've got one from Councillor Ray Thomas.
Thank you very much.
Any other apologies? I can't see any hands. So moving on to agenda item 2. Minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of July 2021. Is everybody happy with these? Could I have a proposer and a seconder that we accept these minutes?
I propose we accept.
Thank you very much.
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Thank you. Do I have any declarations of interest? Any declarations this evening?
I as a county councillor, as a community councillor, I have to declare an interest in matters relating to community councils, although I don't think Dennis Powers crops up here very much. But I have a dismotivation to speak and vote.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson.
I have an interest from Brown Signage number 6 from Colwyn, Brian Morris from Colwynson Community Council, but I have got a authority to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Any others? I can't see any hands. I think that's it. Thank you, Amy. And can I welcome Chief Inspector Arabella Rees, please, for our update. Welcome, Arabella.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everybody. I hope everybody is well. Just before I get into the update, I just want to broadly update on a couple of the issues that we discussed in the July meeting. So there were some very ward-specific issues that some of the councillors raised, and those have been dealt with specifically with those councillors. But more broadly, there were 2 issues raised. One was in relation to packed meetings and a query from councillors as to whether packed meetings were still going on. I've done some work around this, and prior to the pandemic taking place, packed meetings had become less popular in terms of their attendance by quite a lot of our communities, and therefore a decision was made that they would no longer be an across the board expectation, but actually they would only be held in the communities that found value in those. And those which no longer were holding the packed meetings would in fact be holding mini surgeries or drop-in locations, much smaller ones, informal locations across the community areas. So the answer to the question is yes, packed meetings are taking place, but only in the communities where they are being well received, and where they're not, then we're doing surgeries. You should all have had contact from your local policing teams, so you can be in touch with them to know the dates of those and to make sure that you're aware of them. And similarly, we do publicise them across our social media accounts. The other point that was raised in the last meeting was in relation to our website and around the accuracy of some of the information that was on there around officers and staff details. That's been noted. We did an audit after the last meeting and noticed some of the data was incorrect, and that's being rectified at the moment by our communications teams. So those are just a couple of the issues from the last meeting. I just want to broadly update you on a couple of things going on at the moment across the Vale. So looking at our crime levels to start with, our overall crime, when we look from the 1st of July of this year to the 30th of September this year, it's on par with 2020 in that we haven't seen a standout increase and we haven't seen a standout decrease. So what that means around some of those core crime types, violence with injury, so violence that does result in injury to a person at the moment, we're seeing as being down by about 5%, which relates to about 15 crimes during that time period. However, we have seen violence without injury, so where someone doesn't suffer an injury, but perhaps it may be a verbal exchange, that is up by approximately 9%, which equates to about 20 crimes. Residential burglaries is up 9%, but just to reassure you, that actually means it's only 5 additional crimes. And for me, when I compare that to the 2020 data, given that a lot of people were at home last year, whereas this year they haven't been at home, it actually settles us back into a normal pattern. And I think that's also reflecting to our commercial burglaries, which are down by 60%, which is approximately down by around 20 crime occurrences. But of course, this time last year, a number of businesses may not have been open, so therefore would have been more vulnerable to crime than they would be now when they're fully functioning. So that's our broad crime picture. I'd like to take the opportunity to update you on Operation Elstree, which I've spoken to this committee about previously, which was our coastal policing operation that ran from the 1st of May to the 5th of September this year. And of course, that now being complete, to update you on the outcomes. So we put the operation together to try and face down some of the challenges that we are anticipating seeing on our coast this year due to the increased numbers of persons staying here because of staycations and the uncertainty around COVID travel, but also off the back of some of the challenges we saw at Ogmore by Sea and some of the other coastal areas during the 2020 summer. So we wanted to make sure that we were ahead of that and we were anticipating those concerns, and that we'd do so with our partners and have a really good forum for getting ahead of issues and responding to them the minute that communities raised them, to try and face down the challenges before they became a real concern. And it's worked really, really well. We've been able to work in that partnership to face down really specific challenges such as water safety or missing children, but also some of our longer term hotspot locations. We've been able to share messaging and highlight key problems. We've done joint road shows, we've done joint patrols, and it's been really a really good place to be working together. In terms of tangible outcomes, that has allowed us to try some slightly new initiatives this year. Now, some of the councillors may have seen either footage or in person our quad squad who've been out and about at Ogmore by Sea and at Roost Point. We've had the antisocial behaviour boat that's been running along the coastline down the rural Vale, and we've had a lot of our old favourites, which are mounted patrols, officers on foot patrol. And in fact, over the operation period, what that's equated to is over 1,000 additional policing hours along the Cardiff Bay through to Ogmore by Sea coastline, including over 270 of those hours being volunteered by our special constabulary. We've reviewed our reported instance of antisocial behaviour for the operations time period compared to the 2020 period. We've removed all of our COVID calls and therefore just looked at pure antisocial behaviour. And what we've seen is a reduction of 45% in terms of reported antisocial behaviour incidents along those 8 resort locations during this summer period. The most significant reductions we've seen were on Barry Island. So we had 78 reported incidents this year. You compare that to 174 during 2020. Roost Point, we've gone from 61 last year to 28 this year. And then Penarth Marina and Penarth Esplanade are down from 93 last year to 53 this year. The other areas haven't seen, nowhere has seen an increase, but they haven't seen as stark a decrease, or perhaps they've remained on par as to where they were last year. We've had a number of arrests during the operation, a number of Section 35 notices given out, which were related to dispersal powers. I think I briefed the committee on previously, fixed penalty notices, alcohol and drug seizures. So lots and lots of different positive action taken. And I'm really, and I know that this was a worry for our communities, I'm really pleased and proud of the officers, because I think that the early preventive approach that they have taken, working with our partners, has meant that we haven't seen those repeats of disorder that we saw last year. And I know some of our communities were really, really worried going into this summer about how that might look and how that might feel. So of course, policing never stands still for long. So now we've got we've parked the summer and we're looking ahead to Halloween and bonfire night and Christmas and those next sets of key dates. And we're looking at putting out our additional patrols into our hotspot locations, and the community teams being in touch with local partners, local businesses, to organise activities that people can go and celebrate those key dates, as we know that they will want to, but do so in a safe way, and to do so in a way that's also COVID compliant. And our key message that we are putting out is, if you are going to celebrate these, and if you are going to partake, just be aware of how your actions impact on other people, because we do understand that this can be quite a difficult time for other people as well, and especially Halloween, it can be quite scary. So that's where we are at the moment. I think we're in a good place. It was a difficult summer. You'll have seen a lot on our media feeds about the increased demand that we are seeing across the board, the number of 999 calls we're receiving, the number of 101 calls we're receiving, protests and events. But locally, I'm really proud of the policing service the teams have delivered. And that would be my update for you.
Thank you very much. Have I got some questions? Yeah, I can see Councillor Carroll. Would you like to ask your question, please? Are you there, Councillor Carroll? Can't hear you. Shall I move on? Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, apologies for that. Line isn't great. Councillor George Carroll, Vale of Glamorgan Councillor for the Landau Ward. Just wanted to place on record my thanks for getting the pact back up and running in Landau. I know that it's much appreciated by the committee there, so thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Councillor Julie Aviett, your question, please.
Yes, hi Arabella, it's Councillor Julie Aviett from the Gibbonsdown ward. Recently I've had 2 incidents of armed response in my ward, which I don't think led to anything, but I was just going to ask, what warrants an armed response? Is it just like, say somebody says, oh, my neighbour threatened me with a knife because I parked in a space, or is it, oh, there's someone wielding a machete in the street? Can you just give us some examples why armed response would come? Obviously, I'm not expecting you to speak on incidents and that, but can you just give an example? And the other one was the helicopter was out as well. Can you give us an example why helicopters come out as well? Thank you.
Okay. So if I deal with the question in relation to our arms response, so working on, without knowing the instance, I'm working on the basis that these were firearms officers who turned up openly carrying firearms, because of course our firearms officers can turn up to incidents not on a firearms response, and they'll be seen to be carrying a handgun at that point, because they are police officers, and if there's a threat to life they will just go to it. Assuming we're talking about there being a firearms authority in place, so they are openly wearing the guns, and they are the responding officers. So there's a criteria that we apply when there's going to be a firearms authority, because it has to, as you would imagine, go through an absolutely appropriate strategic tactical firearms commander, and a tactical and an operational commander, to make sure that it is proportionate to the threat that is offered. And that criteria is that there is reason to suppose that somebody may be in possession of a firearm or an otherwise lethal weapon. So that's part one. If it's not that, that the person is otherwise so dangerous that a firearms response is the appropriate response. There's also a number of other criteria to do with animals, so if an animal destruction is required, or to do for a very specific policing operation. For example, if we had a royal visit or protected person, you may see people carrying firearms. But those top two, so the carrying a firearm, otherwise lethal weapon, or being otherwise so dangerous, tend to be the criteria that you apply when you see them coming out in response to 999 calls. It's really, really difficult to say whether somebody carrying a knife and the threats just would be appropriate, because without the context to it, because technically anybody carrying a knife is in possession of a otherwise lethal weapon. And without knowing who that individual was, what warning markers or history they may have with police, what their intention was, what the threats were, it'd be really hard to comment. But that is the criteria we apply, and we do so for safety, public safety and officer safety. And when we give a firearms authority, it is always checked back by a strategic firearms commander to make sure it is appropriate in the circumstances. So that's the firearms authority. In relation to the helicopter, they come out for any number of things, and they can be for safeguarding and vulnerability. So, for example, if we've got a high-risk missing person, so perhaps if we had a young child that wandered off from a premises, or if we had a vulnerable adult who'd walked off, then we would put the helicopter up if we felt that was of value to try and identify them quickly. All the way through to the other side of that, which might be if we had somebody who was suspect for or wanted for an offence which was quite serious, and they may have run off from officers they could be hiding, then we'd ask the helicopter to fly, because they have heat-seeking equipment that would assist officers to almost like lead them in. If that person was hiding under a tree or something and we couldn't see them, it would allow officers to be directed to support them. But there are any number of reasons with the helicopter, but there will always be a degree of risk, because, as you can imagine, it's also quite expensive to put the helicopter up. And if we have it here, it means it's not somewhere else. So we have to justify it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Any other questions? I can't see any other hands up. No, there we go. I can just say thank you very much, Arabella, for updating us tonight, and it's nice to see you. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Bye. Agenda item 5, Fire and Rescue Service Matters, and this is presented by Christian Hadfield. Are you there, Christian?
Hello, Chair. I've been trying to contact Mr. Hadfield. I'm afraid he's been having some technical issues. He has, however, provided me with some notes in preparation for this evening. So with the committee's permission, I can read those for you. And obviously, Mr. Hadfield, I can take any questions and direct them to him. Would that be okay? He may very well join us at any moment, but I thought it might be best to proceed with me going through the notes for the time being. Is that okay?
That's fine. Thank you, Amy.
Okay, so Mr. Hadfield was going to start with updating the committee regarding the pandemic service delivery update. The service is now returning to a new business normality, with staff returning to their headquarters in a phased approach. The operational response during all phases of the pandemic has been maintained throughout, with no adverse service impact to our communities. And the service is cautiously opening its stations to its communities, including charity work. However, all interactions are in line with government guidance and suitability risk assessed. With regards to the Fire Cadet programme, the programme was suspended during COVID. However, the programme has now recommenced at Barry Fire Station and across the other sites. For Key Stage 1 and 2 school visits, stations have now begun to contact schools to offer face-to-face. Sorry, bear with me one moment. Councillor Barnaby is joining us. Stations have now begun to contact schools to offer face-to-face Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 talks in line with extant procedures. Virtual talks are still available if the schools would prefer, and this allows the service to engage with young people who have missed out on many activities that enrich the curriculum and support safety and well-being. With regards to deliberate refuse fires, in 2001, the service saw a large rise in deliberate refuse fires across the Vale. Station crews at Barry and Penarth were given the reference of identifying hotspots areas and liaise with the service's fire crime department in order to develop a strategy to deal with these incidents. Weekly deliberate refuse fire reports are now generated from the service stats department in order to assist with identifying hotspot areas. And this has now decreased the number of deliberate refuse fires, and they're now seeing figures lower than immediately post the pandemic. And then the final note here from Mr. Hadfield is regards to a large-scale exercise being conducted by the service at the airport in November 2021, so next month. And a large-scale water rescue exercise is scheduled to take place at Barry Docks in early 2022. Also, crews from the Vale of Glamorgan will be attending a multi-agency large-scale high-rise buildings exercise in late October, which is being held in the Cardiff Authority area. That concludes Mr. Hadfield's notes, Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have any questions that we can take back? Anybody wants any information about anything? If there is, please raise your hand and we can get the information for you. I don't see any hands up. So moving on to agenda item 6. This is the request for consideration from Colwinston Community Council about brown signage. Unfortunately, the Vale of Glamorgan officer, Emma Reid, this afternoon has said that she's unable to attend this meeting tonight. So I don't know if there's anybody here from Colwinston Community Council that wants to add to this consideration. But can I propose that we postpone this and have it as an item in our January meeting? Would everybody be in agreement? And could I have a seconder for my proposal, please? Councillor Miss Ian Perry.
Just a comment, because obviously some of the this refers to my community wards in St Nicholas and Bombleston with a new road, which very few of my residents would describe as excellent. So I had hoped to raise the fact that that new road has brought considerable extra traffic through my community, considerable extra road noise, which before the new road was open was already harmful to the health and well-being of residents and identified by the Welsh Government a decade ago as an area requiring priority action to tackle that noise issue. So I'd be disappointed for it to be deferred, because I think this is something that needs to be tackled now. I'm also holding a copy of the traffic advisory leaflet 0113 published by Department for Transport in January 2013 on reducing sign clutter. And that is something that hasn't happened in my community. St Nicholas, for example, is a village. There is a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. There's a lot of warning signage in the village. There are 2 signs warning people of traffic lights. There are a number of signs warning people of hidden junctions. In an urban area, they shouldn't be there. And every few years, they get renewed at a cost to the public. Yeah, so they should be removed. They do not belong there. As for our brown signage, it's a mess. We have 2 signs in at the top of Dufferin Lane, one for Dufferin Springs and Dufferin Gardens, and the second one for St Lythan's Burial Chamber and the Tinkinswood Burial Chamber. You only need one. So we've got a situation where our road signage is a mess. There's lots of clutter. It needs to be sorted out. And if it is sorted out, it will save us money. So, yeah, I'm here ready to discuss it and other issues like the destruction of the Witton Mower Roman villa to build that horrible road. But if you want to defer it till January, we can talk about it then. But January is a long way away, and it's unfortunate that there's no one here to speak about it.
Yeah, I think it was circumstances beyond our control, and I do apologise for that, Councillor Perry. We will take it on board, all the comments that you've said, because obviously this meeting's recorded, so we can pick up those points. So thank you for that. Councillor Parker.
Yes, no, I would second the fact that we defer it. Obviously, it's quite unsatisfactory. We've had plenty of warning on this meeting. Dealing with the last speaker, I actually can't find any record of what he was speaking on the thing, so I suggest he actually brings that forward formally at the next meeting. So I would propose, regretfully, that we defer it, but please, please, please make sure we don't get the same thing again.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Parker. Councillor Michael Morgan, please.
Yes, no, likewise, I'm a little disappointed we're not discussing it tonight, but I understand why. The point that I was going to make is to support the idea that our pubs are signposted from the A48. The Sycamore Tree is a wonderful little pub, but also all along the A48 we have, you know, the Fox and Hounds in Llancarvan, you have the Sportsman's Rest, the Three Horseshoes and the Red Lion in my ward. In recent years, we've lost pubs like the Green Dragon in Llancadel. The position is that these pubs are the hubs of their communities, but they cannot survive without the support of the outside communities. So it is important that people know where they are and how to find them, because we don't want to lose any more pubs. I like my pubs. So I just want to record that note, really, and I do hope we can have a positive discussion at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Christine Cave.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very disappointed that we're calling for a postponement here. And in actual fact, I think January is far, far too long to wait for these very important matters to be discussed. And can I suggest that instead of postponing it till January, because I think we've waited long enough to discuss these issues, that we have a special meeting as soon as Emma Reid and the team, that support this particular committee, can get a special meeting together so that it can be discussed before January.
Sorry, can I second that?
Yeah, that was Councillor Perry, is it?
Yeah, I would second an extraordinary meeting of this committee to discuss road signage and supporting our pubs, because I agree. I've got a lot of pubs in my in my wards and nearby, and they are struggling, and we could do a little bit more to help them without a £2,000 bill. So if I can second Christine Cave's request that we have a special meeting held before January.
Okay.
It may be that you need a county councillor to second Christine, so I would second it in case that's necessary.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Baker? Has got a hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to support that proposition that it is so essential for our local businesses to survive in some very, very difficult circumstances, and it's too important a matter to leave until after Christmas.
Okay. Thank you. Karen, did you try to get my attention then?
Chair, I was just going to say that it's a matter for the members of the Vale Glamorgan Council to obviously vote on whether you have an extraordinary meeting or you defer to January. There's the vote, but I would say that obviously we would like a show of hands as well from the community council, community councillors as to what they would prefer, and obviously the request from the member of the community council. Probably that would be a good point as well to ask them for their view.
Okay, let's go back then to Colwinston Community Council. Have we got a proposer that you'd like to have an extraordinary meeting?
Yes, I think I would agree that we should have an extraordinary meeting, please.
And have I got a Vale Glamorgan seconder for that?
I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you,
Councillor
Robertson. Yeah, okay. Can I have a show of hands? I think I've got quite a few yellow hands up. Can you, if you want to put them up to vote for an extra special meeting, can we just have hands shown for an extra special meeting? I've got a lot of yellow hands. Can you count them, Amy?
Chair, I would say you've got your confirmation that to move it to a special meeting. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. So we'll sort that out for you and come back to you. Councillor Baker.
Chairman, if I may as well, just for clarity for the recording, there was obviously a motion put on the table with regards to a deferment, which was seconded by Councillor Parker, but just to confirm that you are happy to remove your deferral motion as seconded by Councillor Parker, and we're now going with the second motion on the table, which was to hold a special meeting regarding the request for consideration.
Yeah, I'm happy to withdraw my proposal. And Councillor Parker.
I'll confirm that as well. While you're listening to me, many years ago, we actually found some funding for all the brown signs for the bed and breakfasts and things. The Assembly have actually got funds available. Now, no pub can afford £2,000. And what I would suggest we do before this meeting, we actually get somebody in the council to actually investigate the money that is available to help tourism, which actually meant that the people that had the bed and breakfasts, I'm talking going back 10 years now, but it was very successful. So maybe Karen could pass that on to the appropriate committee people.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think have all hands gone down now? Councillor Perry, is your historic hand? And Councillor Parker. Right, and Councillor Parker. There we go. I have got no hands now. So that agenda item is now closed, and we'll come back to you with a date for a special meeting. Agenda item 7. Request for consideration from Uweni Community Council for the rural roads policy. Mr. Mike Clogg is presenting this. Are you there, Mike?
Hello, Chair. Yes, I'm here. And I have a small presentation which I'll share in a moment, just to try and explain how the council manage and discharge the highway function in relation to rural and urban roads, and that these processes should adequately address the different needs of both. So I'll try and get the presentation going. Just bear with me a moment. Oops. Okay. Sorry for the delay. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, Michael, it's up now. Yes, we can see it.
Good. Okay. Thanks very much, and sorry for the delay. So going on to the first page, and just to run through the current arrangements, and as you can see there, we manage the local road network in the Vale in accordance with our statutory duty, and the elements of our statutory duty are listed below, and the first is to maintain the highway to ensure safe passage as far as reasonably practicable. That comes under section 41 of the Highways Act 1980. We've also got a duty to ensure traffic moves freely and reduce congestion where practicable, and that is under the Traffic Management Act 2004. And we also have a duty to take steps to prevent accidents occurring, and that comes under the section 39 of the Road Traffic Act 1988. Perhaps I should mention that we've probably got an awful lot more responsibility, and there's more legislation in terms of how we do manage the highway, or how we can manage the highway. But those are the basics of the duties that we have in accordance with the legislation. Oh, sorry, gone the wrong way. Gone the wrong way again. Right, there we go. So just to run through each of those processes, and maintenance of the highway would be the first one. We have a highway safety inspection manual which sets out our policy in terms of managing the whole of the highway network, and the council sets its own standards based on a network hierarchy within that highway inspection manual. So that generally recognises the nature and character of individual roads to ensure they're maintained effectively. So how is that done? Well, the hierarchy differentiates between, or generally over, volume of traffic and usage. And we, based on that traffic volume and usage, then we allocate different schedules for inspections. Our inspections are either monthly for those heavily used principal routes, and then as the level of usage drops, we move to 3 monthly and 6 monthly. So the 6 monthly would be the lesser used routes on the network. Within that highway safety inspection manual, then we have intervention levels, and when I say intervention levels, they're effectively details of when we would take action to rectify a defect that we identify on the highway. and they're currently the same for all roads. Generally, for a carriageway, the intervention level will be 40 millimetres, and for footways it will be 20 millimetres. So investment in highway infrastructure, we obviously have a programme of investment in the highway infrastructure. This relates to resurfacing works, surface dressing, etc. And the way we prioritise this work is through our highway maintenance 3-year plan. Some of you, I think, may remember that I gave a presentation on the 3-year plan, well, probably several years ago now, just to try and advise as to our processes. But effectively, we have a prioritisation scoring system which considers 8 separate factors, and those factors are specific to certain elements of the roads. But the main criteria, as you can see listed, are visual assessment, engineering assessments, and maintenance costs that we gather through the inspection process and through the repair works that we carry out on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. The annual works programme for the 3-year plan, we try and do as much as we can, but unfortunately it is limited on an annual basis due to budget availability. So safety on the local highway network. We obviously have, as I mentioned before, we've got a duty to try and make the highway safe as far as possible. And to do that, we review collisions on the local highway network. And we do that because the police themselves have a duty to investigate collisions, and the police record those injury collisions, and they report them to the Welsh Government, who validates the information, and then they pass that information on to local authorities on generally a 6-monthly basis, albeit we have intended to get that information a little late. So we review those collisions and we look at the significant collisions to try and understand where priorities lie in terms of additional works or schemes to try and improve road safety. So as the point makes there, we use that process to prioritise funding for future safety improvement schemes. Unfortunately, funding for safety improvement schemes is very limited, and we generally have to look to make applications for grant funding to the Welsh Government to address any particular problems. And that grant funding itself is becoming more and more difficult to obtain through the normal processes. We also, as you can see the last point there, obviously our statutory duty is undertaken through the review of collisions on the network, but we also get a lot of concerns raised on a weekly basis, and we try and investigate each concern on a case-by-case basis and consider how best to deal or address those concerns. Again, we would like to be doing more, but our position is limited by funds that are available. So, in summary, the management of the individual roads is based on our statutory duty. The procedures in place generally already consider the nature and character of each road, whether that's on the rural or within the rural environment or urban environment. And the above ensures that the limited monies that are available is allocated appropriately to whatever road is deemed to be a priority. That's generally the end. As I say, it was a brief presentation. That's generally the end. I hope that gives a brief idea as to the way that the council manages the highway network. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to try and address that.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that presentation, Mike. Can I ask anybody who would like to ask a question to raise the yellow hand or wave at me on the screen? I've got one question for Councillor Ian Perry.
Oh, yep. Ian, you don't want to reply to that first, or should I just continue?
Sorry, no, go on. You can carry on, Councillor Perry.
Yep. Obviously, that didn't quite touch on the request for a rural plan, although I'm not sure anywhere where there is a rural plan, but I'm aware of the issues on the lanes of the Vale where you have dips and ruts and little patches here and there, and I know I'm well aware of the problem. Michael raised a 3-year plan, which I guess we'll be discussing the next 3-year plan in January at our next meeting. And he mentioned a scoring system. Now, I've already mentioned today that the noise levels in St Nicholas and Bombleston, where along with one little small section in Wenbo, we were identified 10 years ago by the Welsh Government as areas for priority action for tackling road noise. So I'm wondering if in that scoring system, road noise will be, that's particularly where it's been identified as being damaging for the health and well-being of residents, whether that will actually be added to the scoring system, and that would make perhaps St Nicholas and Bombleston, where the road is actually a very busy road, made busier by a new road, that should really be top of the list for the next 3-year plan, shouldn't it?
Okay, well, at the moment, the criteria doesn't include any noise action levels, and I should make clear that you do refer to priority action that the Welsh Government, or you suggest there's legislation that Welsh Government say we should take priority action. We actually don't have any legal requirement to take any action over road noise, albeit if we do look at resurfacing any areas, then we should consider the impact of road noise, and we should be selecting materials and road surfacing materials which reduce the impact of road noise where possible. As it stands at the moment, we don't have any plans to incorporate noise within the scoring criteria, but it's possible that we could review the arrangements in the future, and if we felt it was appropriate and reasonable to do so, then it's possible that we could consider including such a criteria.
Okay, just quick then. So the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which includes health and well-being, isn't part of the scoring framework that you're going to be doing when you come up with this new list?
Well, I've said the criteria that we have at the moment. I'll run through what the criteria is if you want, but it doesn't include noise levels. And as I've made clear, we don't have a legal requirement to consider road noise as such, albeit it's clear from the guidance and the legislation that if we do resurface a road, then we have a responsibility to look at the type of surfacing that we're laying down and ensure that that new surfacing does take account or does reduce impacts wherever practicable.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Perry.
Just to ask one further thing, which comes up from Lee Waters, MS. In July, they published new guidance regarding active travel infrastructure. And on page 25 of the new guidance booklet, it says that whenever you carry out works to resurface or do repairs and maintenance to the road, you should at the same time look to improve active travel infrastructure at the same time. Now, obviously, Bombleston has got footways, and when people drive through there, you can see how narrow they are. You can't actually get a wheelchair down most of them. They're that narrow. Will the
You've dropped out, Councillor
Chair,
Perry.
I think I understand what. Yeah, I think I understand what Councillor Perry is saying, and what I would say is that we are actively seeking to obtain grant monies and funding for active travel throughout the Vale. in various areas, and we've been successful in doing that in a number of areas. Regrettably, our highway resurfacing budget is very limited, and it's not possible to consider widening footways as part of that resurfacing budget. We do need to spend it and allocate it specifically on roads resurfacing, surface dressing, and we need to look, as we have been doing and as we've been successful in doing, finding additional monies, grant monies, to try and improve the highway network in terms of encouraging active travel routes, etc.
Lovely, thank you, Mike. Can I ask Councillor Michael Morgan for the next question, please?
Right, yes, no, thank you, Mike, for that report. And I entirely understand your restrictions as far as statutory duties and funding are concerned. But my question really is, what can we as a council do for the future to improve safety on the country roads, the lanes? Now, as you know, I'm the ward councillor for Peterston Super, really, where I have Pendoilen, Welson Donnet, St George's, St Brides, a lot of country lanes. And, we are very much a thoroughfare for people taking shortcuts. Now, these lanes obviously weren't designed for cars in the first place. But I wonder, what can we do in the future? For example, we have a situation where you come off the A48 towards Peterston, you go along, so you come out of a national speed limit, you go into a 40-mile-an-hour limit past the new houses in Bonvilston, and then you have the slight sort of difference. You have a road sign that says the road is going to narrow, but then you have a road that says you're now entering the national speed limit. And I know that is the law. I know that if it's not a restricted area, it's national speed limit. But is there something as a matter of policy we can say that if you are on a road where two cars can't pass comfortably, then that should not be national speed limit? The majority of people drive sensibly, but there are fools out there who think that 60 miles an hour is the norm and that's what they're entitled to do. So is there something that maybe we can't do at the moment, but is there something we can lobby for to make speed limits on our country lanes safer? We're grateful, certainly in Peterston, for the experimental 20-mile-an-hour limit that goes through the village, and we hope that that will be followed through in other communities. And the other point of this, as far as roads are concerned, and again, this goes back to the question of active travel, which I know doesn't include us out here in the rural vale. It's how do people get around the towns, etc. But isn't there something we can put into policy for the future, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, or whatever, to make it safe for people to walk from village to village on the road without being at risk of being run over, to make it safe for cyclists and cars to live in perfect harmony? Because at the moment, you have the law which says, you must give people 2 meters to pass their bicycles. There isn't 2 meters on a country lane to do that. You have the people on horseback. Again, you say you must have 2 meters to safely pass them, and you can't. I was watching a group of riders going through the village on Sunday morning, and there are a lot of cars behind them. And to be fair, most of those drivers were very, very courteous and doing their best, but they couldn't give a wide berth to the horses. And the walkers and the horses were on these roads before the cars. So I know that within the scope of what your department, Mike, you're limited in what you can do, but what can we as a council do for policy for the future? Because we're all trying to live in a greener environment. We're all trying to preserve our communities. We're all trying to preserve our rural communities, but we need to make things safer. I mean, I take my life in my hands at least twice a day when I cross the road to take the dogs out, because despite the fact we got a 20-mile-an-hour limit, people don't observe it, and they come around the top of our hill at 50 miles an hour, and I've had to jump a couple of times, but so that's my question. It's not really for Mike, it's just an observation for our council as a whole. What can we do about this policy? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. I will make a few comments if I can. I suppose, I do understand the concerns, but, we have concerns throughout the Vale's local highway network in terms of speed, not just on rural roads, but on urban roads as well. It is an ongoing issue for us, and As you are possibly aware, the council don't have any speed enforcement authority. The enforcement of speed limits is purely down to the police. In terms of driver behaviour, it's the rural road network is historic and it is limited. The width of many rural lanes is limited, but it is the case that you shouldn't be driving any faster than you can view the road ahead and have clear safe stopping distance. That applies to the rural road network as well as the urban network. There are many restrictions, not just within the rural network, but within the urban network as well. So there is some commonality, but I understand that perhaps the rural road network has more restrictions in terms of the historic nature. I think it's very difficult as a matter to deal with. How do we manage to enable vehicles to safely pass cyclists and horse riders when the carriageway width is so restricted? The width of the adopted highway through rural areas is limited. The only thing that we can do is we can look at trying to widen the roads, but that's to a certain extent takes away from the character and nature of the areas. It costs a significant amount of money which we don't have. Potentially we could look at active travel routes off the main highway, perhaps in adjoining land, but again that itself leads on to issues about obtaining land or permissions to do that from landowners. So there's all sorts of problems, and the cost is likely the prohibitive problem in relation to doing or to trying to make improvements along those lines. So there's I accept that there are some difficulties, and I think generally we're limited in how we can improve things for the rural road network based on their historic nature, i.e. the limited nature of the network, and the fact that the cost to make improvements would be prohibitive in terms of the money that we have available.
Thank you, Mike. Can I ask Councillor Helen Baker to ask her question, please? Helen.
I'm afraid you're on mute, Mrs. Baker.
I'm afraid we're very disappointed in the Vale, in the rural Vale, that our concerns are not being dealt with the due respect that they deserve. In Iweni and Corntown, we have vehicles going through the village at certain times of the day during the rush hour, considerably in excess of the speed limit, which is 30 miles an hour. We have quarries at either end of the village with very large vehicles which go through the village, which is not conducive to safety. The vehicles use the road as a rat run to avoid congestion on the A48 for the Iweni roundabout and the Waterton roundabout. A few years ago, we lost our bus service, and so we have many elderly people who are not able to drive. We have a number of visually impaired residents who are not able to drive. They need to access public transport. It involves a lengthy walk to the one end of the village along pavements which are not adequate. To access the services that operate on the A48, that involves a journey of 1.5 miles on a road where there is no pavement, and where the speed limit is 60 miles per hour. Now, that's a very difficult task for them to undertake. Whenever we, as a council, make comments about the road safety in the Vale, we are told the attitude seems to be that unless somebody's been killed, nothing is going to happen. I'm sorry to put it quite so deliberate, but that is the situation. And I'm afraid there's a shortage of volunteers. We can't get anybody to come and volunteer on that. We've several dangerous junctions in our area, and there have been incidents. I've lived in the village since 1987, so I've known of quite a number of near misses. There's particularly at the junction at the end of Wick Road, where it meets the main road going through to St Bride's, near the Owenny Garden Centre. At the junction of Wick Road, Stony Lane, Tyrecroys, and the entrance to Beach Court Farm, we've asked that the vegetation be cut back on the Wick Road so as to improve visibility. The road at that section on Wick Road is only the width of one vehicle. Now, the roads on Wick Road last year, there was an incident where a horse was killed by a driver. And the area is used an incredible amount, especially during the pandemic, by people who walk, who ride their horses, and they're cyclists. We have frequent cycle races that come through the village. And community council is not always informed about when these things are going to happen. So it does cause us problems. On many of the roads within the area, there's not room for two vehicles to pass safely. So the vehicles drive onto the verge, which results over the period of time, great dips in the verge, which gets filled by water during the winter. And it also leads to the breakdown of the edges of the road. We've had, on the road that goes from Owenny to Landau, there was a sign erected that says unfit for HGV lorries, but the lorries are still going back and forth to the Landau industrial estate. And they are very big lorries. They're not little sort of milk float size. They are very large lorries. And it's very frightening for anybody who is walking like I do, or anybody on a bike or riding a horse, to have these big lorries bear down on you. Very often after a blind bend or things of that. And I'm sorry to be so excitable about it, but it is something that really impacts on everybody's everyday life. And it seems to be that the local authority is not taking cognizance of all our concerns. And it's very, very frustrating for the people who live in the area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Baker. There's a lot of things that you've raised there, and perhaps just to pick up on a few. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to cover all of them, but I'm aware that we've been in communication with the community council on a number of issues, and we've tried to assist. And I'm aware of some of the concerns that you've mentioned in terms of the footway. I think I think it's probably incorrect to say that there's no respect. We respect the concerns raised by any community council or town council or individual, and we try our very best to look at what those concerns are and to see if there's a solution. But I think generally I must say that the reality is that we are limited by funds that we have. We are limited by grants that we can obtain, and we do our very best to try and bring funds in and to try and identify schemes that we can move forward. But it's the same from the rural position to urban. We have demands on our services throughout the entire Vale, and unfortunately we cannot we cannot keep up with that demand, and we can't address that demand because of the limited funds that we have. So we have to make hard decisions. We have to look at situations specifically, and I've already touched upon the narrow rural lanes and the position there, and how difficult that would be to deal with in terms of not just budget, but perhaps land purchase as well, or land acquisition. And again, the fact that if we do widen roads in rural areas, is that going to change the nature and character? So there's a number of issues which we would like to do more on, but it's just outside of our ability to assist as perhaps we would like with the limited funds that we have. In terms of speed, again, I've mentioned that we don't have any speed enforcement powers. That comes down to the police, and I know the police have limited resources as well, and the Go Safe speed watch team. They have specific criteria in which they will allocate their speed watch vans to specific areas. But there's one thing that communities can do if they have a problem with or concern over speed, and it's becoming more and more popular. You can set up a community speed watch group, and you can try and address speed in that respect. I think perhaps perhaps the last thing to mention is the HGV usage of small lanes. Well, that is an ongoing problem in various areas, and another difficult one to deal with. The only way we can deal with it is potentially looking at putting in restrictions to restrict the weight of vehicles using particular roads. That requires legal orders, and it requires the support of the police as well, because the police at the end of the day have to undertake enforcement, and enforcement of these restrictions can be specifically problematic and complex, and we very rarely get any support from the police in terms of what we call environmental weight restrictions, and that's a weight restriction where we're doing it for environmental reasons that you're suggesting, i.e. because of the impact it's having on local communities. So it's very difficult for us to move forward with those sorts of proposals when we don't get that support. And we do put up signs, as you've mentioned, to try and discourage HGV use on roads that are clearly not suitable for such use. But again, there are businesses which operate in rural areas which do need access to and from those businesses, and sometimes some HGV access is necessary. I'm sure I probably missed some points there, but that's perhaps a few comments in relation to your concerns.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for your question, Councillor Baker. Can I ask Councillor Mary Jeffries for her question, please?
I'm from St Donald's Community Council, and we have a specific concern about the state of the verges and the pull-ins, the lay-bys along Splot Road, which is the main road from Lantwood Major Wick main road into Atlantic College. The potholes there are extremely dangerous. We have written to the council several times and requested a site meeting, and we've been turned down for this. But the council is very concerned because we feel there is going to be an accident. And in fact, recently there was a film crew there, and the reason they filmed on this road was because they were filming a film supposed to be set in Bulgaria, and they thought the state of Splot Road was very similar to what they would find out there. So I don't understand why, we can't have a site meeting with a representative from the council.
Well, I'm prepared to arrange a meeting. That's not a problem. I would say that probably the condition of verges along certain rural roads does pose a significant problem and a difficult situation for us. The point's been made that traffic has increased over many years, and not only that, the size of vehicles being used has increased over many years, even to the extent, in rural environments, the size of farm tractors and equipment is significantly larger than it was or it has been previously. And we try as best we can to keep on top of any defects and have them repaired. And again, we do inspect roads on a regular basis to identify those defects and repair them where possible. But I think probably what you've identified is a specific problem which is very, very difficult to deal with. I've dealt with it in other areas, or tried to deal with it in other areas. It is very, very difficult. We will repair the edge of a carriageway 1 week, and before you know it, due to the heavy usage, the large vehicles that are overrunning the edge of the carriageway and the verge, the problem is there within a couple of days or weeks after. It's a very, very difficult problem to deal with, and I have no immediate and easy solution to that problem, I'm afraid. But I'm happy to meet with you and look at it and see the extent of the problem.
Yes, if you could do that, we'd be grateful.
Okay.
I'm afraid you're on mute, Chair.
Thank you. I've got a cough and I keep muting myself. Councillor Anne Barnaby to ask her question, please.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's Councillor Anne Barnaby from St Athan Community Council. We have had the pleasure of meeting Michael because he visited our community council fairly recently. And because we had a couple of public meetings due to traffic problems in the village, and but I would like to thank him for attending that, and also for Emma Reid. But the couple of points I would like to make is the wellbeing plan. It was adopted by the Vale Council. It has been mentioned here tonight, and I have found on a couple of occasions now with planning as well that it doesn't seem to be applied. It was probably very expensive exercise to produce this plan. It went down well. There was a lot of good points. But if the Vale Council planning does not actually refer to it when they actually make decisions, then it's really not worth the paper it's written on, which is quite a shame. So that's one point I would like to make. The other point I'd like to make, which is relating to that, is the lack of planning is the problem, not Michael's having to sort the issues out from planning. We've had a recent housing development going. It's actually being started to be built, and in the application, in one of our comments and objections to the application was this actual situation of the planning would mean that the majority of people are going to go through the lanes, through St Hilary, through Landau to get to Cardiff. There is no way they're going to follow the council's view that they're going to go down the Northern Access Road, or they're going to go round St Athan and round down the Northern Access Road towards the Landau, back round to the St Athan Monument, and then down 5 Mile Lane. It's just not realistic. And I think planning needs to be more realistic as to what people will do, because I put in all the measurements, all the routes that they're going to likely to take from that location, and it's obvious they will be heading through the very narrow lanes of St Hilary to the A48 and Landau, and yet the planning department would not take any notice of our comments. So I think that is a lot of the problem with the rural Vale, with our roads, is very poor planning decisions, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Do you want me to? I'm not sure I can offer any comments really regarding the well-being situation, but in terms of the planning situation, and I'm not a planner, but obviously we do get involved with planning in terms of new development sites, whether that is industrial or generally, I suppose it's residential. There's been a lot of residential development ongoing in the Vale over the last 5 years or more, but I can assure you that there are transport assessments undertaken in terms of the impact that a development will have on the specific road network in areas, so that we can understand that. And where necessary, we do require that improvements are made to that road network where we feel there's a justified need to request that is done by the developer in question. In terms of routes that people will use to and from development sites or residential sites, that's something that we can't really dictate. There is an adopted highway network throughout the Vale. People are able to use that adopted highway network as they wish, as long as they are following the appropriate signage and legislation in place at any one time. If people choose to use small narrow lanes, then it's very difficult to stop them doing that. Albeit if they're delayed, then they may find or may choose not to do that in future and stick to the more the wider, more principal routes. I think it's the same in either the rural Vale or urban areas. You get rat running along certain roads, and people tend to try and find the easiest route for them, and people will continue to use and try different routes until they find what they consider to be the most convenient one that suits them for their destination. It's a difficult situation, but one that's sometimes difficult to prevent.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate that. And as I've mentioned, I do appreciate that it is, this is planning more than with the highways, but obviously highways do comment. But what my point is the highways assessments are not realistic to the reality. They're an idealistic view of where people think they should be going. And the idealistic view is they were going to put Northern Access Road in and that would be used. But that isn't the reality where people need to go and where they were likely to go. And I'm not saying it should stop the development, but I'm saying we should assess the reality of what people are likely to do, not just what we would like them to assume to do. So otherwise, it's bad planning. And I do think that that is a big problem in the rural areas where, it is too much idealistic rather than reality. We need a common sense approach. And common sense would be that people will take the shortest route, and how can we mitigate it? So that's, anyway, I've gone on long enough, so thank you very much.
You're on mute, Chair.
Mute your chair.
Sorry. Councillor Parker, sorry to have kept you. Would you like to ask your question?
No, that's fine, Chair. No. I mean, very interesting to listen to all of that. My question actually is going to relates to the A48, which has come up. Now, I know, Michael, that there was a study done to try and rationalise the speed limits from Bridgend right the way through to Culverhouse Cross, and perhaps you could just let the committee know where we are on that. And to support you, I do sit on the planning committee, so I actually read most of the things, and I must say the highways people are very, very competent in actually dealing with matters. Sometimes, even on a few of my planning applications, it's been very, very helpful. Finally, just a quick thank you, because you haven't had too many thank yous tonight. The 3 ward members are very grateful for the help that you gave in getting the 20 mile an hour speed limit in St Hilary. I can assure you it is working a lot better, although really what we now need to do is move forward whereby, although it's not enforceable, sooner or later, once we get enforceability on the 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, people will react very quickly and hopefully put the safety first. Many thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Parker. You know, in terms of the speed limit along the, or speed limits along the A48, I think there's quite a variety of speed restrictions, and you know, where we have residential properties, or there's a sensitive nature, then the speed limit does reduce. But as we've heard from Councillor Perry, then perhaps you know, there's more work to do in some areas. You know, we do look at concerns raised in terms of speed limits, and you know, where we feel there's a need to react and to address concerns, and where we can find appropriate budgets to act accordingly, then we will try and assist as best we can. In terms of 20 mile an hour, I think you're probably all aware that there's a proposal for the Welsh Government to implement a default 20 mile an hour speed limit throughout Wales, and that will apply to numerous roads. We are working with Welsh Government and their consultants TFW at the moment on the extent and the extent of the network that will have the 20 mile an hour limit on it. So it's difficult to to confirm what particular areas will be involved. Generally, it's where there's a 30 mile an hour default limit at the moment that will then default to 20 mile an hour. But there are probably some areas as well that we need to look at and modify to suit that new proposal. Again, that's an ongoing piece of work, and it will be quite a significant piece of work, which we're running through with Welsh Government and their consultants. And the intention is that the default 20 for Wales will be implemented in April 2023.
Thank you, Mike. Can I have a question from Councillor Christine Cave, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank Michael for his presentation, and I'd particularly like to thank you, Annie, for posing the question of rural roads policy. And you can see tonight from the debate that we've had that the consensus seems to be that we do need a rural roads policy, because everybody that has spoken has individual issues around the rural roads. So I'd just like to bring it back to UNE's proposal for a rural roads policy, and ask Michael to consider that actually what we're asking for is something that could help you, because you often talk to us about your statutory duty, and you talk about your network hierarchies, and your programmes for investment, your scoring systems, and all of those things. But they don't seem to make any difference to the problems that we're facing on our rural roads. So can I suggest that maybe what UNE is calling for is a rural roads policy that is innovative, that doesn't see the difficulties of having the rural roads as something that should be a problem that's just fairly and squarely on your lap, Michael, but that it is something that as a council, because it is us elected members, that should be innovative, and we should be putting forward suggestions that can make a real difference. And everybody that uses rural roads would like them to be far safer, and actually recognise the difficulties that the cyclists and the walkers and the horse riders and the tractors and the drivers face when they use their rural roads, and the rural roads are lumped together with all the other roads in the Vale. When you were talking, I was really keen to have an understanding of how many miles in the Vale of Glamorgan are actually rural over the miles that aren't. Because I think that would be a really good starting point for us, because if we were to say that as a council we were going to be really innovative and we were going to actually say that our rural roads policy could be something that was really innovative, and actually it could start by recognising that our community councils can in fact be our major asset, because they are the people that use the rural roads. They are the people that actually quite often know where the problems are and know where the solutions often lay. Now, you say that one of the biggest stumbling blocks for you is funding, and I have no doubt that that is 100% true. But actually, if you were to see the community councils in the rural Vale as an asset, what you could actually do, I was thinking while you were talking, is ask the question, is there anything that the members of the rural communities can do for you in trying to leverage funding from Welsh Government or from any other area that funding could possibly come from? If we keep saying, yes, we know there's a problem, and I think you said it's a difficult matter to deal with, and yes, no doubt, if we carry on with the same policy of ignoring the fact that the rural roads are in some way different from the other roads that you look after, and often the matter isn't about coming along and just sweeping down a bit of tarmac where it might be that's the solution elsewhere. What we need here is a rural roads policy that actually uses everybody that lives in the rural Vale as a resource to leverage funding and actually try and do something different for them than carry on with the same old, same old. We are the elected members. Surely it is now for us to say as elected members, we want change to our rural roads. How are we going to get it? Is a rural roads policy the best way forward?
Thank you, Councillor Kay. Do you want to come back on that, Mike?
Only to just say that we do understand and recognise that roads throughout do vary in their character and nature, and we do we do give that consideration to specific issues when we do assess concerns and problems that are raised to us by community councils or town councils. And I do understand Councillor Cave's passion for a rural road policy. However, it's clear to me that the community councils within the urban environment could make exactly the same claims, and we do always get, or we do certainly get, concerns raised of a specific nature from those urban community councils in relation to their highway networks. So there's passion from various locations, community councils in both rural and urban situations that want to improve the highway network, the safety and the usability of the network for their residents, and we try and achieve that, or we try and deal with that as best we can, given our resources and our funding. And I'm certainly open to any assistance that that can be provided by community councils, whether rural or urban, as to how we can access funding in the future.
Thank you, Mike.
Sorry, could I just come back on that point and say, how is that going to happen? I don't think it should happen in an ad hoc, sporadic way. I think we as a council should try and lead that in terms of, yes, the community councils, especially in the rural Vale, are an asset. They often understand the problems and they very often have the solutions. So how are we as a council going to make use of that as a valuable resource to be able to leverage funding in the way that we've just suggested. We don't want to leave it onto an ad hoc basis. What we need to be able to do is actually, as members, drive that forward. And the only way I can see us being able to properly do that is to have a proper rural roads policy.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cave. Would it be, can I suggest that we have a recommendation from this committee to look at a rural roads policy, and we'll come back with more information in due course?
I'd certainly second that. That would be a fantastic idea.
Can I just add one little point? Because obviously with Bomson was mentioned, the A48 speed rationalisation. To correct the speed limit in Bomson will just cost £10,000. There is £200,000 of S106 money sat in the Vale of Glamorgan Council's bank to deal with St Nicholas and sustainable transport, which has just been sat there for 3 or 4 years now. The Community Council of St Nicholas with Bombleston did ask that the Vale of Glamorgan would put future S106 money in highways. Yeah, and so perhaps part of the policy should be going forwards, and we keep being asked to influence how S106 money is spent. We get all this new housing, and we have more and more problems with the highway network. And rather than having S106 money going straight into affordable housing, creating more problems, not mentioned in Bombleston, instead of having all this money collected going to more and more housing under the term affordable housing, we actually prioritise the highway network from S106 money, because we've got no infrastructure levy on new development, but we need to change the policy of the Vale of Glamorgan Council into putting money, first of all, into the highway infrastructure and making sure that active travel comes first, but also we do have roads that are safe and usable.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. That's noted. Can I come to Councillor Mike Cuddy, who's been waiting patiently? Thank you, Councillor Cuddy.
Thanks. I'd like to build on what Councillor Caves was saying, and just to advise people that there are two sort of formal structures now coming forward, which can, legitimise a rural roads policy. One is the 20-mile-an-hour speed default consultation, which in the recommendations, which I think are wholly supported by the Deputy Minister in charge of that consultation, recommend that communities be involved in the definition in respect of the 20-mile-an-hour default, which are at the moment are only applies to restricted roads, sadly. That is roads with lights, 200 meters, I think, or 200 yards, but should legitimately, I think, be extended to other roads as well. But there certainly is a recommendation that the community be involved in the assessments or contribution to the discussion on where exceptions to that default apply. The second is that the Vale are now consulting on going to start to develop, consultate on the local development plan review. And there I would recommend that communities get in early. Now, a lot of the things discussed tonight won't be appropriately applied through planning legislation, but certainly the debate at large, and certainly as it will reflect potential allocations, can certainly get these arguments in early, so that again the community is involved. So there are two formal points at which community councils can be involved if they're not involved in other means.
Thank you, Councillor Cuddy. Yeah, good advice. Good advice. Can I ask Councillor Andrew Robertson, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think there seems to be a fair amount of accord here. I think everybody realises, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Mike for his presentation. And I think particularly in places like Dennis Parish, we're very aware of the strains that Mike is under with trying to cope with the COVID problem, with the lack of funds for actually maintaining roads in the way we'd all like to see them maintained. But the real issue here, I think, is actually We need a coordinated transport policy which covers roads. The Welsh Government has backed off from actually doing any new road building, even though it's patently obvious that you can't expect everybody to cycle and walk to work all the time. They've withdrawn the Junction 34 scheme. They've abandoned the Dinas Powys bypass. We're sitting in an area which we're talking about rural, but it's becoming less and less rural. This area is being subjected to more and more housing development because the Vale of Glamorgan is where people who work in Cardiff want to live. And we have a major problem with housing policy versus transport policy. I'd just like to see the Welsh Government actually making some sensible decisions about actually road building and road maintenance in rural areas and in areas like Dinas Powys, which used to be a rural area. I think we all want to see some sort of integrated policy, and I don't think we've got one at the moment. We need that very badly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything to that, Mike?
Well, I suppose the only thing I would say is in terms of a transport policy, you know, we can't continue to rely on the private car going forward. You know, we have a climate emergency, and you know, we have too many vehicles on the road at the moment. You know, we have congestion in key areas. You know, we have to consider how we're moving around the Vale and you know, moving to you know, to work in Cardiff or other areas. You know, we've got to consider, you know, we've got to encourage people to use active transport, to use public transport. We've got to get a clear behaviour change. You know, gone are the days when you get in your car and pop to the shops, you know, for 5 minutes down the road. You've got to think about walking and cycling. We've got to get that change of behaviour. Otherwise, you know, we're going to continue to end up with in these discussions, and traffic issues are going to continue to get worse. It's not a solution to continue to, you know, to drive everywhere. We have to think of other ways of doing it. And the transport policy, and certainly policies within the Vale, do set out that agenda that we want to encourage people to think of different modes of transport. And that's a key element that we should all be taking on board and thinking about from this meeting.
Thank you, Mike.
Just come back there, Chair?
Yes, certainly.
Very briefly. I know what you're saying there, Mike, and I totally agree with you in many ways. But the problem is, and well, not the problem, but one of the things which the solution is that by 2030, the internal combustion engine will be a thing of the past, more or less, and we'll be seeing a huge number more electric cars. So the climate emergency side of things, I don't think is actually going to be particularly relevant by 2030. And I don't think it's realistic to think an ageing population are going to be cycling and walking everywhere. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right. I've got 3 hands up, but I think they could all be historical hands. And I think Mike has answered a lot of questions tonight. So are those historical hands? Councillor Baker, is that a historical hand? You're muted, so I can't hear you.
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry.
It's not a historical thing. It is something. It's all very well to try and persuade people to get rid of their cars and all the rest of it, but unless they've got a viable alternative, they're going to hang on to them for as long as possible. Our bus service has been removed. So how do the people in the village who may be physically impaired to some extent, how do they access services without a public bus service? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Parker.
Yeah, thank you. Only just to come back on Councillor Ian Perry's on the 106. 106 are very, very specific. Money cannot be diverted from education to highways and highways to education. That money is finite and it cannot be diverted.
Thank you. Councillor Barnaby, your hand is still up. Is that historical?
No, I just wanted to come back on that last point, and I totally agree with the last councillor. It's a bit of idealistic that people are going to use public transport, especially in the rural Vale. You know, we're putting housing association houses in places where there is no chance of them using public transport. You know, any housing that we're putting in the rural Vale, it's impossible to use anything other than your car. So if the policy of the Vale planners and highways is that we use public transport, why are we putting so many housing in the rural areas? They should stay in the cities. So I just, it's unless we literally put a new railway link in or do something for the buses, people are not going to give up their car, I'm afraid. And it'd be great with the electric car, but that's a long time coming, and even then someone's got to generate the electric to, so there will be obviously a need to generate the electric, so it's still not going to be that green. So the ideal thing is that planning think about things like that and actually build the houses where the work is, not based on commuting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnaby. Councillor Parker.
Sorry, just come back on that. The rural housing policy of allowing houses in the Vale, the only way youngsters can afford to remain in the areas that they've lived is, in fact, if the housing associations are granted permission. And I would say, although I was always against it and still probably am to a certain extent, Darren Farm, we have 192 houses which are being built specifically to allow the youngsters that live in the rural Vale around Cowbridge to remain. So no way will we stop that policy.
Thank you. Can I thank you very much, Mike, for your presentation and answering all the questions. It's obviously a lot of strong feeling in the rural communities and a lot of work to do. So, but thank you very much for this evening. Thank you for all your questions, everyone.
If I may, Chair, just to clarify, we obviously had a motion on the table with regards to raising a recommendation for a draft rural roads policy, which was seconded by Councillor Robertson, moved by yourself. So just to confirm that we will raise a formal recommendation to pass to Cabinet of the Council that we draft a rural roads policy specific to the Vale in close consultation with town and community councils, taking into effect all of the various matters that have been raised this evening.
Yes, thank you, Amy. Do you want to vote on that, Amy, or is that okay?
I'm happy to take it on no dissent, Chair, if you're happy.
Okay, if there's no dissent on the recommendation that Amy has just said, we'll have that written. Any dissent? There's one hand up. Councillor Parker. Are you against the recommendation?
Sorry, I meant to take it down. Apologies for that, Chair.
That's okay.
We all do it every time.
Yeah. Okay, and there's no dissent, so that recommendation stands. Thank you, Amy. Okay, agenda item and the last item, item 8, request for consideration from Landau Community Council, relocation and modernisation of the civic community site at Landau. And we've got Mr. Colin Smith to present this for us this evening. Good evening, Colin.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks very much. Okay, I'll just pop up. I've prepared a few slides. Okay. Can you see that okay, Chair?
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so this is for the consideration of the modernisation of the relocation of Landau Household Waste Recycling Centre. So just to recap what we've got at the moment, in case some members are not familiar with the site. So the existing arrangement is the rural Vale site is situated on the Landau trading estate. There's no doubt the site is outdated and is not very particularly user friendly. All the skips are on ground level and you have to climb up a number of steps and manually handle loads. is not ideal, and when skips are being changed around by our contractor, and often they've got to close the site, and it's very compact and very small. So it has a limited capacity, and the access restrictions are obviously a real burden, and the site is under 0.4 of 1 acre. So we have ongoing issues with the access road as well, and I guess everybody living in the rural Vale is completely fed up with the access road. It's laden with potholes, etc. And regardless of what we've tried to do with the landowner, there hasn't been any goodwill coming forward to undertake those repairs properly. In recent months, since we've been discussing the future of the site, they have said that they've got money to improve the road access, but to be honest, I think we'd all agree that unless we see some action, we'd never believe that would ever occur. So there's only real one future for this site, and that's to relocate it. The current lease on this site expires in January 2023, so we've extended that twice on an annual basis, just to keep continuity of service while we look at other options. But obviously the good news is that there is a commitment to have this site relocated. So considerations for a new site, we will need to meet certain criteria, and that it will be some land that will ideally need to be identified on the LDP for employment allocations, be designated for industrial use, be able to achieve a planning permission for a waste site, which is quite difficult today, and meet all the transport and access requirements, and meet the requirements for an environmental waste permit, which is quite stringent. So there are limited options across the rural Vale. We've done this exercise 5-10 years ago, and we've tried 3 times in the last year or so without any success, unfortunately. But we have a few options that now we are able to be considered this summer that's come through. So when we've looked at the where we can place there, where is an industrial use site that's available, and then when you start looking at close to Lantern Major and centrally in Cowbridge, etc., there's just not very many sites available, and the only one that came back to the table was across Landau, and it really suited the brief we were looking at. Because we went out twice previously looking for land options, and although lots of people expressed an interest to work with the Vale, when it came to it, there weren't any options available, viable options for us to consider, and that was anything returned up until the last maybe 4 or 5 months, to be honest. So what our estates team did, we looked at all the land, and we did land searches to find out who owned the land across all the areas. We came up with a list, and we approached them all to see if any of them were interested in entering a long-term lease for our requirements, or whether they were looking to or consider disposing of the land they had. So this is an image from Google Maps. It just kind of really shows the area we're looking at, where we're probably the only place we could probably get a site that would meet the requirements for planning and environmental permits, I guess. So just to give you an idea where we are at the moment, our little site is down in this corner, and this is the burden we have at the moment. We're not just being a small site, as this access road is very poorly maintained, and the areas we're looking at around here, an area here, and an area over there, which I've prepared to some photographs to show you. So option 1 that's been returned only this summer to us is a vacant land, which is Unit 1 on the Vale Business Park. Now this is on the other estate to where we are at the moment. So this is on where the Ford place is, Weavers, and this access road down here is an option to us all through the middle of the estate. And there's quite a large piece of land there that may be up for grabs for us, really, to be honest. It's 0.8 acres in size, so our existing site is 0.4 of an acre. So there's lots of development opportunities for us. Long-term lease options. It's an industrial use site and has existing employment site. It's a large flat site with a concrete base already in situ, although we would have to prepare the drainage requirements to meet the environmental permit expectations, and the access roads are in good condition and the site is generally well maintained. It's quite a favourable site for achieving planning and the environmental waste permit, so it's likely that we might be able to achieve those. Option 2 has been returned, is the site that's placed east of the Place for Homes area. There's some vacant land there that may be available for development. There's 1.8 acres, 1.5 acres inside, which is probably about the right size we're looking for, ideally. Something about 3 or 4 times the size of the site we've got now. There's lease and possible purchase arrangements, but they need to be determined. It's an industrial use site, but not designated as an existing employment site on the local development plan at the moment. But our estates team has been looking into these options over the summer. Roads are in good condition, but the B access road is narrow in parts, and it is of concern, to be honest, when we've done some evaluations over the summer. Planning permission may also be difficult to achieve. It's unallocated status within the LDP at the moment. But it is a spacious site and it's got adequate space for queuing traffic, and the environmental permit requirements are a little bit unknown at the moment, and we'd have to explore those. Okay. Option 3 to us, this is quite recent, but quite a large area of land has become available. And this is under a different landowner to the existing site we have at the moment. And where we've got those, looks like a racetrack areas there. This is going to be up for development shortly, although the landowner wants to develop some units on that site. So there's 8 acres in total available, and as I mentioned, the landowner is looking to develop some units on that site. But it's quite possible that an acre could become available for development with ourselves, and a possible long-term lease could be available to us. It's an industrial use site, and it has an existing employment. It is an existing employment site, which will help us with the planning permissions. And it's a blank canvas, so we're not looking to take on the existing land liabilities, which could be difficult in some of the other areas where there may be some land contamination issues, etc. Roads are in good condition at this end of the site, and then we would look to put our own access road in so we could avoid any problems like we have with the existing site where the access road is maintained by a third party. And we think that's quite a favourable site for achieving planning and environmental waste permit. So option 4 is just down from this site, but it's a continuation of the existing road leading to the site at the moment. And this is an old scrapyard site that could become available for either purchase or lease. 1 acre will be available, which would be suitable. It wouldn't be as big as we would ideally like it, but it would be 2.5 times the size of the site at the moment, so it would be workable. And there could be purchase and lease options available on the site. And it's currently classed as light industrial use, which we would have to kind of explore a little bit more, which our estates team has been doing, to be fair, over the summer. The status is unclear on planning and employment at the moment. It is not actually listed. The downside, there could be possible land contamination issues on the site because it has been used as a scrapyard. So I would have concerns on the current state of the any land contamination there. Roads are in good condition at the end of the site, and that could be favourable for achieving an environmental waste permit with the activities that has been ongoing there at the moment. So we've got 3 or 4 viable options for the first time for a number of years, to be honest, and there's at least 2 in there that we're exploring at the moment, and arranging site visits with the landowners to see if we can take this on to the next level. So our estates team continue to do this, and they're undertaking some due diligence at the moment, and hopefully I'll be joining them in the next month or so now to visit these sites and speak to the landowners to see if we can progress a couple of these options. We must admit the option where those racetrack lines are on the site, I'll just see if I can go back up to that one now. This one here is quite a good option for us, as well as that site on the Ford factory. I would say those 2 are probably the viable options for us. There doesn't seem to be too many liabilities on the land. They're completely new landowners that we'd be working with. Either we obviously maybe look at the option to purchase the land outright, or if we have to enter a long-term lease, they are different landowners. So whereas the existing landowner we have had issues with, obviously, with trying to get the maintenance of the road ongoing, etc. So it would be good to work with a new team and a new site owner, to be honest. And that, along with that site up on the Ford factory, I think is probably some really good options that we will try to narrow down So that brings us to say back onto the next step. So the due diligence we have to do is obviously go through, undertake some surveys. We need to look at some land contamination on those sites and whether there is any, what the current liabilities are. We'd have to do some assessments of the requirements for the environmental permitting and planning, so such as drainage, access requirements, etc. And then hopefully we'll tie this up with this calendar year and then go back to Cabinet and present our findings for consideration. We did go to Cabinet a few months ago and we presented these options and to advise them where we were at the moment. And we had hoped this would progress a little bit further over the summer, to be honest, but we're only now really trying to tie up the Lowe's land options, ready to make some recommendations. So we were hoping to aim for a project sign-off early 2022. And this year, what's made this project certainly viable and something we can take forward is the capital programme was topped up by £1 million this financial year, quite recently. So we now have £1.9 million of capital funding allocated to this project. And we hope to have an operational target date of 2023. So that's kind of the end of the presentation, just to go through those options and to see where we are. So really it's probably best if we kind of take any further questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
so
Chair?
much. Yeah, thank you, Colin. I've got two questions at the moment. Councillor Smith.
Yes, Graham Smith from Clanmays Community Council. Thanks very much, Colin, for your presentation. I was very encouraged to hear everything you had to say there. I just wanted to reiterate that, although there are issues, with the current site, the absolute nightmare scenario for all of us, living at this side of the Western Vale, given the issues you've had, would be if you were to close the site in Landau and ask us to drive to Barry to meet with our needs. So very, very pleased to hear the site's identified and that there's been money allocated to that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, there is that, obviously, Councillor, there is that commitment. The capital programme, as I say, is quite decent now. So we've now got 1.9 million to commit to this project. And we've also secured some funding from Welsh Government for some consultancy support on this at no cost to the council. And because we've been going through recent service changes with waste, with the introduction of the source separated recycling scheme, and also we're building a permanent waste transfer station that will sort all of our materials for most of the Vale at Atlantic train station in Barry. So while we're going through all these service changes, we're fortunate enough to capture some consultancy support, and we'll also get financial support towards analysing any land that we're looking to purchase and lease to help us with this scheme. So yeah, it's really good news, really. I think it's long overdue, there's no doubt about that, but there's reasons why it hasn't been done to date, and that's because land availability, having a couple of £1 million of funding to do that, expiry of the existing lease to coincide with that. We've had the impact of COVID over the last 18 months, which has pushed the price of materials, and material availability problems has caused us. So there's quite a few reasons why we haven't done it to date, but I would totally agree it's long overdue, and hopefully that it's a little bit reassuring for certainly members of the rural Vale.
Thank you, Colin. Councillor Cave, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank Colin for his update. I think he's well aware that for the last 4 years it's probably been our monthly correspondence. We've spoken about this matter. It is a shame that it has been slowed down. I'm really happy that we've got some funding in place, that there does now genuinely seem to be some impetus behind finding a new alternative site, which is much needed. And I just wonder if it's possible for you to give us an update at our January meeting as to where we are with it, just so that we can be kept advised.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm happy to come back in January or at 6 monthly intervals, and we could even set up a little roadshow down in the rural Vale somewhere, or something near the existing site, so perhaps a member of the public can come involved and see some of the plans we have at a later stage, and so residents could be reassured. Maybe we could have our event trailer set up on the gate so anybody visiting the existing site can see our future plans, etc. as well.
Lovely. That's an excellent, yeah, excellent idea, isn't it? Thank you very much. Councillor Penrose.
Thank you, Chair. Bob Penrose, elected member, Sully and Lavernock. Colin, only a housekeeping matter, but residents have brought it up a lot lately. Are we pursuing the appointment booking service at refuge sites, or will we be in the future reverting back to the free-for-all system we had previous to the lockdown?
At the moment, Councillor Penrose, there's an intention to retain the booking service, but it could be reviewed for the rural Vale if necessary. The problem at the Barry site is it's heavily used, particularly at peak periods, and we can cause tailbacks across the site. And since we've had that booking system, it's been marvellous, to be honest, in controlling traffic and ensuring the site is evenly spaced out throughout the day, the amount of demands that are on staff. And obviously for the visitors as well, because sometimes when you turn up on a bank holiday on a Sunday, you end up queuing for an hour to get on the site, whereas now they can turn up at an appointment time, no waiting, and more or less drive straight through. Additionally, on the Barry site, we're building a reuse shop, a 100 square metre reuse shop. So that will be going at the front of the site with a separate car park, which will impact on the people queuing for the main site as well. And we're obviously building our permanent waste transfer station at the back of the site, which will eventually have 30 plus of our collection vehicles visiting this on the same road. So I think for the Barry site, we'll have to keep the booking system open. But with the developments of the rural Vale, I mean, there's a lot less visitors on that site. And if there's a point where we can get around the queues and there's not an impact on any sort of traffic studies that we'll need to do to build the site, then perhaps that could be open for discussion.
Thank you, Colin.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Andrew Parker, please?
Yes. Colin, a million congratulations. I know everybody's been struggling with this for 4 years. How you can pull 3 rabbits out of the hat in one go, amazing. One of the suggestions we have heard is that maybe the first 2 hours would not require booking, but after that you would have to book. I think in the rural Vale, most people are very grateful that they can actually say, we want to be there at 2:30, load the car up and do it. So I think certainly we will make sure there's consultation as well to help you.
Yeah, and I think that's quite a good idea, actually, because what we do find is a lot of the appointments aren't taken up in the first hour or so. So it could be that we could explore that option, particularly for residents who want to book on the day. And at the moment, we can't facilitate that at the moment.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the car parking policy. You know, you pay for 2 hours, the next, or the free 2 hours, next 2 hours free, and after that it's free. And once people get used to it, the discipline, everybody loves it and respects it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor Barnaby, please.
I'm just going to add to the endorsements, actually. Thank you very much. I'm a St Athan Community Councillor, so this is quite a regular gripe of our residents. I also work on the Vale Business Park, so I know the sites very well. And I think both the locations that you're suggesting are both be good locations. Certainly the place for homes, I don't think the access onto the road is particularly good. It's not a particularly safe junction, so certainly the other alternatives would be a preference. Just a question on the incineration policies now. Is there any hope of us going back to actually being recycling soft plastics, or are we still continuing to plan to incinerate soft plastics?
Unfortunately, we do at the moment because there's no sustainable markets in the UK. Whereas we might be able to find something abroad, exporting it. Obviously, we've come away from that policy because of the impacts of shipping it around the world and often not necessarily getting recycled properly. So at the moment, we've taken a policy that if we can find a sustainable market in the UK locally that will deal with the film properly and sustainably, then obviously we'll revert to having a recycling mechanism for that. So we're led by markets, really, I guess. And if that market becomes available and it's, as I say, sustainable, then we'll reinstate the recycling of film. But we hope to have some other good news stories in the very near future. The new curbside service we have source separated, we are hoping to bring on battery recycling, small electrical products, and also possibly clothing, textiles as well onto the same service in the near future. So hopefully that's a good news story.
Great, lovely. Is the incinerator problems in Barry, is that going to cause us problems with disposing of waste? If
which incinerator are you referring to? We don't.
We use it. I'm not sure if you use the one in Barry that's been having the problems with the planning.
Oh no, that's a different facility.
Yeah.
That one. That's a different facility. We don't use that. It's not a council facility at all. We use we've got an energy recovery facility in Cardiff, which the 5 councils of South Wales are signed up to, and there is no problem with that at the moment.
Even better, thank you.
Okay.
Lovely, thank you, Councillor Barnaby. Councillor Cave.
Oh yes, thank you, Chair. Just one quick point on the booking system at Landau. I've had it reported to me on very good authority, my husband actually, who's a regular user. He says that once you book an appointment and then suddenly something else crops up in the day, you can't cancel it. And he finds that really frustrating that, you know, once you make the booking, you can't actually cancel it.
Yeah, that's actually quite true. But we're in the process of changing that. We could only open the sites under control measures in the middle of COVID at the time. We had to use software that we already had in the council, so it wasn't bespoke to a booking system for household waste recycling centres. But we have recently purchased one that will give us that function to do that. So hopefully that'll be rolled out in the very, very near future.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Perry, your question, please.
Yeah, just very quickly from me. The only issue I have with the Landau site is it is encouraging car use and car ownership, and maybe this more consideration can be given for residents who don't own cars to get their waste taken away. One thing's popped up in my area because we've got a Cardiff postal address. There have been instances of people from my community turning up at the waste centres and showing their ID, which has got a Cardiff address, and being turned away. So can you make sure that people on the gate make sure that they are aware all the time that some residents of the Vale of Glamorgan do have a Cardiff address? And the other sort of point, we've mostly been talking about the site in Landau, but when I go to the site in Barry, around the site, there is litter everywhere. It's a really filthy area. There is fly tipping outside of the waste collection centre, and it would be really, really nice if that area could be the cleanest area of Barry and not the dirtiest area of the Vale of Glamorgan.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Perry, for those observations. The council address system, I'll check on that with our contractor tomorrow. And it just so happens I'm visiting the Barry site tomorrow morning to meet the contractor about the installation of the reuse shop. So I'll make sure I do a thorough inspection of the area in the morning and make sure that any remedial action required is undertaken as promptly as possible.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Colin.
you.
Thank you. And I think the last question we've got is from Councillor Aviat, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Colin, yourself and Miles Punter and I think Mike Ingram are supposed to be coming down to Gibbonsdown sometime when we can all get together to discuss the bulky waste, not the litter picking, because I do a lot bit of that, you know, with the time banging thing, but it's the bulky waste problem. And I'm going to try to get a meeting with all of you in Gibbonsdown, because it's a big, massive problem in Gibbonsdown. Just to see, what we can do about it. I've got volunteers who've got vans who might take it away for time banking, but can we just like get ourselves together and sort this out, please?
Yeah, sure, Councillor. I am aware of the issues and the discussions that we've had between the three of us. I'll speak to Miles this week and Mike, and then I'll come back to you this week, and we'll try to schedule something.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin, for your good news stories. And hopefully you can report back in the early January, February of 2022 with a site that's been located. So thank you very much.
Thank
you. Chairman, if I may, obviously the update for the January meeting was proposed by Councillor Cave. It wasn't formally seconded, but I just want to pick up on the fact that Colin did also refer to maybe 6 monthly. So I'm not sure whether Colin feels that 6 monthly may have more to report at that point, or whether January is the best time. I just wanted to double check that in terms of future updates.
Okay, which do you think, Colin? Would it be January, February, or 6 months' time? Where are we now? October, November, December, January, February, March.
I mean, the next couple of months will probably go quite quickly, if I'm honest, and with the Christmas break, etc. I don't think there'll be an awful lot of developments, and we'll probably have to take a report to Cabinet for consideration of any proposal we've got as well. So I think probably 6 months is more realistic, and I think we'd see some real action then, by then, to be honest.
Okay, is that all right, Amy?
Absolutely. And you happy to formally second that, Chair?
I am.
Thank you very much. And can I just check that there's no dissent from the committee for that motion?
You raise your hand if there's any dissent. No, all looks quiet.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Can I just remind everybody that requests for consideration, you can apply via Democratic Services. So any council that has got a request, then please send them in to Amy. Thank you all for representing your councils here tonight. And the next date of this community liaison is January the 25th. And I think that's the end of the meeting. Is that all, Amy? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. That is. Thank you very much.
So thank you all very much. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Chair. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.